They survived on rotten apples until the rancher told the Apache widow, "Come inside." The sun hung high in the sky, its heat pressing down like a heavy blanket on the dry, cracked earth. In the middle of the vast desert, a lone figure moved slowly, carrying a small bundle in her arms. Her name was Nava, an Apache widow, and every step she took felt heavier than the last. The ground beneath her feet was rough and uneven, littered with sharp stones that cut into her worn sandals. She wiped the sweat from her brow and looked around. There was nothing but endless stretches of dry land, dotted with scraggly bushes and the occasional stubborn tree that somehow survived the scorching heat. Her children, a boy of 7 and a girl of 5, walked beside her. Their small bodies were thin, their faces pale from hunger and the harsh sun. They stumbled with every step, their feet sore and blistered, yet they did not complain aloud. Naba's heart ached as she watched them, knowing that they were holding on because they trusted her. She could see it in their eyes, the hope that their mother would find food, water, and shelter. But the truth weighed heavily on her. They had been surviving on almost nothing for days, and the food she could find was barely enough to keep them alive. The last village they had called home had been destroyed. A raid had swept through it weeks ago, leaving nothing but ashes and broken homes. Nava had lost her husband in that attack, and with him went the sense of safety she had once taken for granted. She remembered the day clearly, as though it had happened only yesterday. The sound of screaming, the smoke rising into the sky, the chaos of people running in every direction. It all haunted her dreams now. She had held her children tightly and run, not knowing where to go, guided only by instinct and the desperate desire to survive. For days they wandered through the desert with no direction, no shelter, and very little food. They drank from small puddles that had collected in the rocks after rare desert rains, and even that was not enough to quench their thirst. Nava's mind was always occupied with the next step: where to find food, where to find water, and how to keep her children alive. She had become an expert in survival, noticing the smallest signs of life in the desert: the tracks of animals, the shade of a distant tree, the hint of water in a dry riverbed. Yet, despite her knowledge, the desert was unkind. One day, as they wandered further than usual, Nava spotted a tree that had a few apples clinging to its branches. They were small, shriveled, and already turning brown with rot, but they were food. She picked a few, inspecting them carefully before handing them to her children. "Here," she said softly, forcing a smile she did not feel. "Eat these. They will help you a little." Her children took the apples eagerly, biting into them despite the sour, bitter taste. Nava herself nibbled cautiously, trying to make it last as long as possible. She knew the apples were not enough to fill their stomachs, but she also knew that without them, they might not survive the night. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of red and orange, Nava found a small patch of shade beneath the tree. She laid out a thin blanket, the only one she had managed to salvage from her old home. Her children laid down beside her, their small bodies trembling from exhaustion and hunger. Nava held them close, whispering words of comfort that she barely believed herself. She told them stories of the times when life had been easier, when laughter had filled their home, and when their father had been alive to guide them. She knew the stories could not bring back the food they needed, but they could bring hope, and hope was something she could not afford to lose. The night in the desert was quiet, almost too quiet. Neba listened to the sounds of distant animals, the rustling of leaves, and the faint wind that swept across the barren land. She could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on her, heavier than the heat of the day. Her children slept fitfully, waking occasionally to cry out for water or food. Naba comforted them each time, pressing her lips to their foreheads, telling them they were safe, even when she knew the world outside their small shelter was anything but. As the days passed, their survival became a routine of small victories and constant struggle. Nava learned to spot the tiniest signs of edible plants, to collect water from morning dew, and to keep her children's spirits alive with stories and gentle reassurances. She found ways to make the rotten apples slightly more palatable, washing them in water and cutting away the worst parts. Each small meal was celebrated as if it were a feast. Each drop of water was cherished. Yet even in the midst of her despair, Nava noticed something remarkable about her children. Despite their hunger and exhaustion, they showed resilience. Her son would gather stones and make little patterns in the dirt, pretending they were towns and rivers. Her daughter would sing softly to herself, humming tunes her father used to play. These small acts of imagination and joy reminded Nava that life, even in the harshest conditions, had a way of continuing. She clung to these moments, drawing strength from them when her own hope faltered. But the desert was relentless. Food was scarce, water scarcer, and the nights were bitterly cold. Nava knew she could not survive here much longer on rotten apples alone. Every day she scanned the horizon for signs of life, any sign that help might be nearby. Her heart leapt at the sight of distant smoke or a faint trail, only to be disappointed when it led nowhere. She refused to give up, because giving up would mean the end of her children's chances to live. One morning, after a night of little sleep, Nava noticed something unusual. In the distance, beyond a ridge of rocks, there was a hint of movement, a figure walking along what appeared to be a well-trodden path. She squinted, shielding her eyes from the sun, and realized it was a man. He seemed to be watching the desert, perhaps scanning for his own livestock or checking his land. Nava's heart raced. The sight of another human being filled her with a mix of fear and hope. She had learned to be cautious around strangers, knowing that not all people could be trusted. Yet the possibility of help, of food and shelter, was too strong to ignore. She considered her options carefully. If she approached him, she risked rejection, or worse. If she stayed hidden, her children might not survive the day. After a long moment of hesitation, she made a decision. Slowly she gathered her children and crept toward the path, careful not to make a sound. Each step felt like a gamble, but survival demanded action. As they moved closer, the man noticed them, and for the first time in many days, Nava saw a look in someone else's eyes that she had almost forgotten. Curiosity, but not hostility. The story of that first encounter would become a turning point, though Nava could not know it yet. The journey through the desert had tested every ounce of her strength, every bit of courage she possessed. She had survived on the smallest scraps of food, on the bitter taste of rotten apples, and on sheer willpower. And now, standing at the edge of the unknown, she was about to take the first step toward a chance at a new life, not just for herself, but for the children she loved more than anything in the world. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the desert, Nava held her children close. She whispered a quiet promise that she would find a way to keep them alive, no matter what it took. And for the first time in many days, a small spark of hope flickered in her heart, a fragile, precious thing that she would guard fiercely, even in the face of the endless, unforgiving desert. Nava and her children had been walking slowly toward the figure in the distance, their steps careful and cautious. Each movement was measured, as though the desert itself might turn against them if they made a sound. Her children clung to her skirts, their small hands trembling, not just from hunger, but from the uncertainty of what they were about to face. Nava's heart pounded with the same fear and hope. Could this man be dangerous, or could he be the answer to their prayers? The man, a rancher named Samuel, was tall and broad-shouldered. He wore a wide-brimmed hat that shaded his weathered face, and his clothes were worn but clean. Samuel had spent his life working the land, tending cattle, and caring for his property with quiet dedication. His eyes, though wary at first, softened as he noticed the thin, weary woman and her children approaching. He had seen many travelers pass near his land, but few looked as desperate as these three. Something about them struck him. Perhaps it was the mother's determination, or the innocence in the children's eyes, but he felt an immediate urge to help. From a distance, Nava stopped and crouched behind a small bush. She gestured to her children to stay low. They waited for a moment, watching Samuel carefully. Nava's mind raced with questions. Should she call out to him? Should she remain hidden? The desert had taught her that every decision carried weight, but the hunger gnawing at her children's bellies, the exhaustion in their eyes, and the tears that had not yet fallen on their pale cheeks pushed her forward. She took a deep breath, steadying her nerves, and stepped slightly forward, allowing Samuel to see her clearly. Samuel noticed them immediately. He did not raise his voice, and he did not reach for any weapon. Instead, he stood still, observing them quietly. He could see the marks of struggle on Nava's face, the dirt, the scratches from the desert, the sunburn. He noticed the children's hollow cheeks and the way they leaned on their mother for support. His heart tightened. Samuel had lived a long life in the desert, and he knew the harshness of it. He also knew that kindness, even a small gesture, could mean the difference between life and death for someone like them. For several minutes, neither side spoke. Nava's heart raced as she gauged Samuel's reaction. She saw that he was not threatening, that he did not carry anger or hostility in his posture. Instead, there was a quiet understanding, almost as if he could see the suffering etched into their bodies and spirits. Slowly, Nava raised her hand slightly, a gesture of cautious greeting. Her voice was barely audible, dry from thirst. "Sir, we have nowhere to go. Please, can you help us?" Samuel's face softened further. He could see the fear and desperation in her eyes, but he also saw courage, the courage of a mother fighting to protect her children. He took a small step toward them, holding his hand slightly out to show he meant no harm. "Come closer," he said gently, his voice calm and soothing. "I won't hurt you. You look like you need help." Nava hesitated. Years of survival had taught her to distrust strangers, to be wary of anyone who approached. But the sight of her children, their small frames weakened by hunger, made her decision. Slowly, she took a step forward. Then another. Her children followed, clinging tightly to her skirts. Each step was a mixture of fear and hope. Samuel did not rush them. He waited patiently, his eyes encouraging them to take the next step without pressure. As they drew near, Samuel knelt slightly to meet the children at eye level. He smiled softly, a gentle, comforting smile. "Hello there," he said. "Are you hungry?" The boy nodded faintly, his lips cracked from thirst. The girl clung to her mother, unsure but curious. Samuel reached down and picked up a small basket he had prepared earlier. Inside were fresh fruits, bread, and clean water. The smell of it filled the air, and the children's eyes widened in surprise. Nava's heart skipped a beat. She had not seen food like this in days, maybe weeks. Samuel placed the basket on the ground, maintaining a safe distance so they would not feel threatened. "Take what you need," he said. "Eat, drink, rest." Nava's hands trembled as she guided her children forward. They hesitated, unsure if this was real or another trick of the harsh desert. But hunger overcame caution, and they rushed toward the basket. They drank the water first, greedily, their small hands shaking. Then they picked at the fruits, tasting the sweetness that had been absent from their lives for so long. Watching them, Nava felt tears welling up in her eyes. She had been surviving on scraps, on the bitter taste of rotten apples, on hope that felt as fragile as a bird's feather. And now, for the first time in many days, she saw her children smile, truly smile. It was a simple gesture, but it carried immense weight. Samuel watched silently, giving them space, knowing that this moment was theirs, alone. After they had eaten and drank their fill, Nava spoke, her voice still cautious but tinged with gratitude. "Thank you. We don't have anywhere to go. We've been lost in the desert for days." Samuel nodded. He could see the weariness in her eyes, the lines of worry etched deep from constant struggle. "You're safe now," he said. "You don't have to be afraid here. My home is nearby. You can rest, and I will help you however I can." The words were simple, but they carried a weight that Nava had not heard in a long time. Hope. She glanced at her children, who were now sitting quietly, their small hands clutching the bread and fruit. For a moment, she allowed herself to imagine a life where they were safe, where hunger did not rule their days, where nights were not spent shivering in the cold. It was a thought so foreign that she almost could not believe it. But the warmth in Samuel's eyes, the gentle way he had treated them, made it possible to hope. Samuel gestured for them to follow him toward the ranch. Nava hesitated again, the instinct to survive warning her to be cautious. But the desert had taught her that survival sometimes meant taking risks, and this was a risk worth taking. Slowly, she led her children across the final stretch of sand and rock toward Samuel's home. The ranch was modest, but well kept, a safe haven in the middle of the unforgiving desert. Its wooden fences were sturdy, and the small farmhouse looked welcoming in the golden light of the late afternoon sun. As they approached, Nava could see the signs of life: smoke curling from the chimney, the sound of animals in the pens, and the faint scent of cooking. It was a world so different from the barren desert they had been surviving in. The contrast made her heart ache with both relief and disbelief. Could such a place exist? Could this be real? Samuel seemed to sense her thoughts. It's real, he said softly. I'm inside. You won't have to survive on your own anymore. For Nava, the moment was overwhelming. Years of fear, hunger, and struggle had led to this instant, a single invitation that carried the weight of salvation. She took a deep breath, holding her children close, and stepped onto the ranch. Samuel led them inside, where the warmth of the home wrapped around them like a protective blanket. The air smelled of fresh bread and simmering stew, a stark contrast to the dry, dusty desert. Nava's children clung to her, eyes wide with wonder, as they explored this new world that seemed almost magical compared to the harshness they had endured. Inside, Samuel offered them chairs and placed more food and water on the table. The children ate eagerly, their small hands moving quickly as if they feared it might disappear. Nava watched, her heart swelling with relief and gratitude. She felt tears streaming down her face. But this time they were not tears of sorrow. They were tears of hope. For the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to believe that survival was possible, that there could be days without hunger, nights without fear. After the children had eaten, Samuel spoke gently to Nava. You don't have to worry about your children here. You can rest. I'll make sure you're safe. I have enough to share, and you won't have to be alone anymore. Nava's mind struggled to process his words. Trusting a stranger had always been dangerous, yet his actions, his patience, and his kindness left little room for doubt. She realized that sometimes survival was not just about finding food or water. It was also about finding people willing to care, willing to help, willing to see the humanity in others even when the world had been cruel. The evening passed slowly. Nava and her children settled into a small room prepared for them. The children slept soundly for the first time in days, exhausted but safe. Nava sat by the window, looking out at the fading sunlight, her thoughts drifting back over the hardships they had endured. She thought of the rotten apples, the long days of searching for water, and the nights of fear. She thought of her husband, lost to the violence that had torn their lives apart, and of the strength that had carried her this far. And now she allowed herself to feel something she had almost forgotten: hope. Samuel's quiet presence outside the room offered reassurance. He did not intrude, but he made it clear that he was there if needed. The simple act of offering help, of providing food, water, and shelter, had changed everything. Nava understood that survival was not just about physical endurance. It was also about trust, connection, and the willingness of others to extend a hand when it was most needed. In that moment, she realized that while the desert had been cruel, it had also led her to a place of safety, guided by someone who saw her struggle and chose to help. By the time night fully fell, the stars above the desert shone brightly, a reminder that even in darkness, light could be found. Nava lay beside her children, listening to their soft breathing, feeling their warmth against her. She whispered a quiet prayer of gratitude, not just for the food or the shelter, but for the small miracle of human kindness that had brought them here. It was a moment of peace, fragile yet profound, and she vowed to protect it, to nurture it, and to remember that even in the harshest conditions, hope could exist. The desert outside remained vast and unforgiving, but inside the ranch a small family found refuge. They had survived on the barest scraps, on rotten apples and sheer willpower. But now they had found something more powerful, a chance to live, to heal, and to begin again. And for Nava, that made every step through the desert, every moment of fear and exhaustion, worth it. The next morning the sun rose slowly over the desert, casting a golden light across Samuel's ranch. The warmth of the sunlight poured through the windows, awakening Nava and her children in the small, cozy room that had been prepared for them. For the first time in days, perhaps weeks, the children awoke without hunger, immediately gnawing at their bellies. Their small bodies stretched and yawned, and for a brief moment they forgot the harshness of the desert they had survived. Nava watched them quietly, a mixture of relief, gratitude, and lingering fear in her heart. She rose slowly, careful not to wake the children, and looked around the room. The walls were wooden, simple but clean, and the blankets on the beds were thick and soft. Nava had never slept on anything like this in years. She ran her fingers along the fabric, marveling at its softness. Memories of rough blankets and nights on the cold, hard ground flashed in her mind, and she shivered slightly. Not from cold this time, but from the stark contrast. She realized just how close they had come to losing everything, and her heart ached for the days that had passed in hunger and fear. A gentle knock at the door drew her attention. Samuel's voice followed soon after. "Nava, if you're awake, I prepared some breakfast. There's food for you and the children. Come when you're ready." His tone was calm, patient, and respectful, showing neither pity nor judgment. Nava hesitated for a moment, as if testing whether the reality was truly safe, and then slowly got dressed. She called her children, who were still rubbing sleep from their eyes, and together they made their way toward the kitchen. The smell of fresh bread, warm porridge, and fruit filled the room. The children's eyes lit up with wonder, and they rushed to the table, their small hands reaching for the food as though it might disappear. Nava guided them gently, insisting that they eat slowly. She had learned in the desert that food, no matter how plentiful, could be fleeting, and she wanted them to savor it. As they ate, Nava felt a warmth in her chest that she had not felt in a long time, a sense of safety, of being seen and cared for. Samuel watched them from across the room, a quiet smile on his face. He knew the desert could be unforgiving and cruel, and he could see that Nava's trust had not come easily. Her eyes, though softened by gratitude, still held the remnants of fear and caution. But he also saw resilience, determination, and a deep love for her children. That love had kept them alive through unimaginable hardship, and it was the same love that now allowed her to begin trusting him. After breakfast, Samuel guided them outside to the ranch. The children's eyes widened at the sight of the animals in the pens, the fields of grass, and the small garden where vegetables and fruits grew. It was a world so different from the barren desert they had endured. Nava followed slowly, allowing her children to explore while keeping a watchful eye on them. Samuel gave them space, understanding that they needed to acclimate to this new environment at their own pace. He knelt down to speak to them at their level.
"These animals are gentle. You can feed them and learn about them."
"They need care, just like you do. And if you help, they'll help you too." The children nodded, their small faces full of curiosity and awe. They approached the animals tentatively, learning to stroke the soft fur of a young calf and to feed the chickens with grains. Each small interaction seemed to build their confidence, their sense of normalcy returning little by little. Nava watched quietly, a mixture of relief and wonder. She had feared that her children's spirits might be broken by the harshness of the desert, but here she saw them beginning to heal. Their laughter, small but genuine, filled the air, and Nava realized how much she had missed it. She allowed herself a small smile, her heart feeling lighter than it had in weeks. The ranch, with its animals, garden, and steady rhythm of life, was a stark contrast to the chaos they had endured, and for the first time, Nava could imagine a future beyond mere survival. As the day progressed, Samuel showed Nava the ways of the ranch. He explained how to tend the animals, how to gather eggs, and how to water the garden. He offered guidance without commanding, recognizing that Nava was capable and resilient. "You have a strong spirit," he said softly. "I can see it in how you care for your children. That strength will help you here too." Nava felt a warmth spread through her chest. She had feared that her independence, her ability to survive on her own, might be diminished by accepting help. But Samuel's words reassured her. She could still be strong and capable, even in a place that offered safety and abundance. By mid-afternoon, The children had grown tired from exploring and learning. Neva guided them back to the small room where they had slept the previous night. She helped them wash, brush their hair, and settle down for a short rest. Watching them sleep, she felt a deep sense of gratitude for Samuel's kindness. But she also knew that trust was not given lightly, and that accepting help required courage. She thought about the days they had survived on the barest scraps, the bitter taste of rotten apples, and the nights spent shivering. And yet, here they were, alive, safe, and beginning to heal. After a quiet moment of reflection, Nava stepped outside to speak with Samuel. The sun was lower in the sky now, casting long shadows across the fields. I don't know how to thank you," she said softly. Her voice trembled slightly, not from weakness, but from the flood of emotions she had been holding inside. "You've given us more than food or shelter. You've given us hope." Samuel shook his head gently. "You don't need to thank me. I did what anyone should do. But what you've done to survive, to keep your children alive, shows incredible courage. You're a mother, and that courage will guide you here too." Nava felt tears welling in her eyes again. For so long she had carried the burden of survival alone. Now she realized that accepting help did not make her weak. It allowed her strength to shine in a new way. That evening, as the sun set, Samuel prepared a small dinner. Nava and her children gathered around the table, eating together in a way that felt almost like a family. For the children, this was a moment of normalcy they had not experienced in months. For Nava, it was a reminder that life could still offer warmth, kindness, and stability. She thought about the days of wandering in the desert, the fear and uncertainty, and a small miracle of finding Samuel's ranch. It was a turning point, a place where survival could shift into living, and where despair could slowly be replaced with hope. Later that night, after the children had gone to sleep, Nava sat quietly by the window. The moonlight cast a gentle glow over the ranch, and she could hear the soft sounds of animals settling for the night. She reflected on the journey that had brought them here, the days of hunger, the nights of fear, and the long stretches of isolation. And yet she felt a sense of calm she had not known in a long time. The desert had tested her and her children, but it had also guided them to this place of refuge. As she gazed out at the fields, Nava realized that the ranch offered more than just shelter. It offered the chance to heal, to rebuild, and to find a new rhythm of life. She thought about the children's laughter, the small moments of joy, and the sense of security that was slowly taking root. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to dream, not of surviving another day, but of living a life where her children could grow, learn, and flourish. In the days that followed, Nava began to take on small responsibilities around the ranch. She helped feed the animals, tended to the garden, and learned the daily routines. Samuel guided her gently, always allowing her to make choices and encouraging her independence. Nava found that her confidence began to return. She was no longer just a mother struggling to survive. She was a capable woman, able to contribute, to care for her children, and to take part in a community that respected her strength. The children, too, began to thrive. They learned the rhythms of the ranch, helping with chores, exploring the fields, and playing safely. Their laughter became a constant presence, filling the house with a sense of life that had been absent for so long. Nava watched them with pride and relief, knowing that the horrors of the desert were behind them, and that a new chapter had begun. As the nights grew calmer and the days warmer, Nava felt a sense of belonging she had never experienced before. The ranch had become more than a refuge. It was a place of learning, growth, and connection. Samuel's quiet presence, his kindness, and his respect for her independence had created a space where hope could flourish. And as she watched the children sleep peacefully each night, Nava knew that the journey through the desert, with all its fear and struggle, had led them to a place of safety and promise. The days on Samuel's ranch passed with a quiet rhythm, different from the harsh unpredictability of the desert. Nava had begun to understand the flow of life here, the rising sun signaling the start of chores, the animals needing care, and the fields and gardens demanding attention. At first everything had felt overwhelming, but she had learned quickly, guided patiently by Samuel, Each day brought new lessons, small successes, and moments of joy she had long thought impossible. Nava's children flourished in this new environment. Her son, who had been so thin and fragile when they arrived, and now ran through the fields, laughing and calling out to the animals. He had taken a particular interest in the chickens, delighting in collecting eggs and carefully carrying them back to the kitchen. Her daughter, once so quiet and withdrawn, now sang as she worked, filling the ranch with her soft, melodic voice. Seeing them grow stronger and happier brought Nava a sense of relief and pride unlike anything she had felt in months. She realized that survival had been only half of what they needed. Now they were beginning to live. Samuel continued to guide them gently, never rushing, never demanding, and always encouraging. He showed Nava how to tend the garden efficiently, planting new vegetables and learning the best ways to water and nourish the soil. Nava marveled at how the plants grew under her care, responding to her touch and attention. It was a lesson she had not expected, the feeling of nurturing life rather than struggling merely to survive. She found satisfaction in small victories, rows of healthy vegetables, well-fed chickens, and the animals behaving calmly under her care. Each day brought a new sense of accomplishment, reinforcing her growing confidence. Yet, even as life on the ranch improved, Nava still carried the memories of the desert with her. The nights when hunger had gnawed at her children, the endless sun-beaten days, and the fear that had never left her haunted her dreams. But she found comfort in the routine of the ranch, in the consistency and safety it provided. Slowly, the memories became less painful, softened by the daily reality of warmth, nourishment, and protection. She began to feel that she could face the past without being overwhelmed by it, and that thought brought her a quiet strength she had almost forgotten. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low and cast long shadows across the fields, Nava sat with Samuel near the barn, taking a short rest from her chores. She watched her children play with the young animals, their laughter filling the air. "It's strange," she said softly, almost to herself, "to think we could ever be safe like this. I never imagined life could feel easy." Samuel nodded thoughtfully. "It is strange," he agreed, "but it is real. And it's what you've been working for all along. Survival, yes, but also a life that allows your children to grow and thrive. That's what this place can give you." His words carried both respect and encouragement. Nava felt the weight of gratitude in her chest, but also a deep understanding that this new life would require effort, care, and dedication. She could not simply rely on Samuel's kindness. She had to take part to nurture and protect this safety for herself and her children. Over the next several weeks, Nava's bond with Samuel grew stronger, though it remained grounded in respect and mutual understanding rather than dependence. They shared small moments of conversation, stories of their pasts, lessons learned from hardship, and dreams for the future. Samuel told her about his life on the ranch, the challenges of managing the land, and the quiet satisfaction of seeing it thrive. Nava shared memories of her village, of her husband, and of the struggle to keep her children alive in the desert. Their conversations became a bridge, a way for two very different lives to connect through shared humanity. The children also began to grow close to Samuel. They learned to trust him not just for their survival, but for companionship, guidance, and support. They followed him around the ranch, asking questions and absorbing his quiet lessons about caring for animals, planting seeds, and respecting the land. Samuel never treated their curiosity as bothersome. Instead, he encouraged it, recognizing that their curiosity was a sign of hope and resilience. Nava watched with pride as her children learned and grew, their confidence returning in ways she had feared were lost forever. Despite the improvements in their lives, Nava continued to nurture her children's connection to their heritage. She taught them about their Apache culture, the stories of their ancestors, and the lessons of survival and respect for the natural world. Samuel encouraged this, understanding the importance of preserving identity and history, even while building a new life on the ranch. The children thrived in this balance, learning both the practical skills of ranch life and the wisdom of their ancestry. One day, while working in the garden, Nava noticed her children laughing and running with a small calf. She smiled, feeling a joy that had been absent for so long. She remembered the days of the desert, the hunger, the fear, the endless searching, and realized how far they had come. Survival was no longer the only goal. Growth, learning, and happiness had become part of their daily lives. The ranch, once a strange and intimidating place, had become home. Evenings were the quietest and most reflective part of the day. Nava would sit on the porch watching the sunset, her children playing nearby and Samuel tending to the animals. The golden light bathed the fields in warmth, and the gentle sounds of the ranch created a sense of peace she had never known. She often thought about the desert, not with fear, but with a sense of gratitude for the strength it had forced her to find. That strength had carried her to this place of safety, allowing her to embrace the possibility of a new life. One evening, Samuel approached Nava with a basket of freshly picked fruit. "Your children have done well today," he said gently. "You have done well too. I think it's time we start preparing for more than survival. It's time to think about what kind of life we want to build here." Nava looked at him thoughtfully, realizing that he was right. They had survived the worst of the desert, and now they had the opportunity to build something lasting, something that would give her children a future filled with hope and possibility. In the days that followed, Nava began to take on more responsibility around the ranch. She helped manage the animals, learned to cook more efficiently with the ingredients Samuel provided, and even began to make small repairs to the buildings and fences. Each task brought a sense of accomplishment, reinforcing her confidence and independence. She realized that accepting help did not diminish her strength. It allowed her to use that strength in new and meaningful ways. The children's growth continued to amaze her. Her son became skilled at feeding and caring for the animals, showing a gentle patience that Nava admired. Her daughter took delight in helping with the garden, learning to plant and water the crops with care. Both children laughed more freely, slept more soundly, and spoke more openly than they had in months. Their joy was infectious, and it lifted Nava's spirits in ways she had not thought possible. Samuel remained a steady presence, offering guidance without imposing his will. He respected Nava's decisions, encouraged her independence, and celebrated her successes. The ranch, once simply a place of refuge, had become a community built on trust, respect, and shared responsibility. Nava realized that this was the life she had been seeking, not just survival, but a chance to thrive, to care, and to grow alongside her children in a place of safety and hope. One particularly warm afternoon, Nava sat under a large oak tree, watching her children play with a young foal. Samuel approached quietly, carrying a small basket of fresh herbs and vegetables from the garden. He sat beside her without speaking immediately, simply observing the scene. "You've done well," he said finally, his voice calm but sincere.
"Your children are thriving because of you. And
You're stronger than you realize."
Nava felt a swell of pride and gratitude.
For so long she had doubted her abilities, questioned her worth, and feared the future. But here, in this moment, she could see the fruits of her resilience and determination. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the fields, Nava reflected on the journey that had brought them here. The desert had been harsh, testing every ounce of strength and courage she possessed. Yet it had also led her to a place where kindness, safety, and opportunity awaited. The ranch had become more than a home. It was a sanctuary, a place of growth and healing. And through it all, Nava had learned that strength, love, and perseverance could create a life worth living, even after unimaginable hardship. By the time night fell, Nava and her children were asleep, their breathing slow and peaceful. Samuel tended to the animals and ensured that the ranch was secure for the night. The quiet of the evening, the soft sounds of nature, and the sense of security wrapped around the family like a protective blanket. For Nava, it was a time to reflect, to rest, and to appreciate the life that had begun to bloom after the trials of the desert. The ranch had become a place of hope, a place where the past's pain did not define the future. Nava understood that life would continue to have challenges, but she felt prepared to face them. She had learned the value of trust, the strength of resilience, and the importance of compassion. And most importantly, she knew that together she and her children could face anything, with the support of someone who cared and the safety of a home they could call their own.
Time passed on Samuel's ranch, and with each passing day, Nava felt a growing sense of stability she had never known before.
The desert was still a part of her memory, but it no longer controlled her life. She had learned to trust herself again, to trust her children, and to trust Samuel in the quiet ways he had shown kindness and respect. Her children thrived, running freely in the fields, laughing, learning and growing stronger each day. For Nava, the hardest battles of survival were behind her, and now she faced a new challenge, building a life that felt permanent, safe, and full of hope. Mornings began with chores, feeding the animals, collecting eggs, and helping in the garden. Nava watched with pride as her son carefully tended to the calves and her daughter watered the young vegetables, their small hands steady and confident. Laughter filled the air as they worked, their previous fear and exhaustion replaced by curiosity and joy. For Nava, these moments were a reminder of how far they had come, from the hunger and desperation of the desert to a life where growth and learning were possible. Samuel remained a steady presence, guiding them without pressure. He never imposed his way of doing things, understanding that Nava and her children needed the space to adapt, to learn, and to regain independence. His support was quiet but consistent, repairing fences, guiding Nava in the care of animals, and teaching the children skills that would serve them throughout their lives. Over time, a sense of mutual respect developed. Nava knew Samuel cared for them deeply, but it was not pity that connected them. It was shared understanding, humanity, and a recognition of strength in one another. One afternoon, as Nava worked in the garden, Samuel approached with a small bundle of fresh bread and herbs. "Your children are learning quickly," he said, his voice warm. "And you're doing very well, Nava. You've come a long way from the desert." Nava paused, brushing her hands on her skirt, and smiled softly. "I couldn't have done it alone," she admitted. "But now I see that we can thrive here, that we can grow, not just survive." Samuel nodded, understanding the deeper meaning behind her words. Survival had been about keeping their bodies alive. Now, life was about nurturing hearts, minds, and spirits. The ranch offered more than food and safety. It offered a sense of belonging. Nava began to feel rooted in a place for the first time in years. The land responded to her care. The animals grew healthy under her hands, and the garden flourished. She realized that the stability she had longed for was not just about physical security, but about community, routine, and purpose. Each day brought small achievements, an animal fed, a plant thriving, a child learning that created a rhythm of life filled with meaning. Evenings were particularly special. Nava and Samuel would sit together on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. The children played nearby, their laughter echoing across the fields. These moments of quiet reflection allowed Nava to appreciate the journey they had undertaken, the hardships of the desert, the fear, and the endless struggle, and the miracle of reaching this point. Samuel spoke sometimes of his own past, the challenges he had faced managing the ranch alone, and the satisfaction of creating a place of safety and growth. Nava listened, feeling a connection that went beyond words, rooted in shared resilience and understanding. One evening, as the sky turned a deep orange and the shadows grew long, Nava reflected on her life before the desert. She remembered her village, her husband, and the community she had lost. The memories were painful but also precious, reminders of love and family. She realized that survival had taught her not just how to endure, but how to cherish what truly mattered. Her children were alive, healthy, and learning. They had hope, safety, and the chance to build a future. That knowledge gave her strength she had never known before. The children began to thrive academically as well. Samuel, though uneducated in traditional ways, encouraged learning. Nava began to teach them reading and writing using simple methods. Each evening after chores were done, they would sit together under the soft light of lanterns, practicing letters, numbers, and stories. The children's excitement for learning amazed Nava. She saw their curiosity flourish, their minds eager to explore the world beyond the ranch. For the first time, education was not a distant dream, but a tangible reality. Nava also found her voice in ways she had not anticipated. She began to contribute to the planning of the ranch, suggesting improvements to the garden layout, new ways to care for the animals, and ideas for organizing daily tasks. Samuel welcomed her input, impressed by her intelligence and creativity. The partnership that developed between them was rooted in mutual respect. Nava was no longer simply a guest or a survivor. She was an active participant in building a home and a community. As the seasons changed, the ranch flourished. Crops grew abundantly, animals multiplied, and the children became skilled at all the tasks of ranch life. Nava marveled at how much had changed since the days of the desert, when she had clutched her children close and scavenged for food from rotten apples. The contrast was remarkable. The harshness of the past had forged resilience, determination, and love. But now those qualities were being channeled into growth, learning, and joy. One particularly warm afternoon, Samuel suggested a small project, a space for the children to learn outside, where they could combine practical skills with their growing knowledge. Nava eagerly helped him create a small garden classroom, with a shaded area, benches made from old wood, and plots of soil for hands-on lessons. The children were thrilled, planting seeds and learning how to care for them. Their laughter filled the air, a constant reminder of the journey from despair to hope. Nava watched them and felt a profound sense of pride. Evenings became a time for reflection and storytelling. Nava would share the stories of her people, of her ancestors, and of the lessons learned in the desert. She passed on knowledge about resilience, respect for nature, and the importance of family and community. Samuel listened, often quietly, appreciating the richness of her culture. He encouraged the children to ask questions, to explore, and to connect with their heritage even as they learned the practical skills of ranch life. The blending of their worlds created a sense of harmony that nurtured all three lives. One night, as they sat around a small fire outside the farmhouse, Nava looked at her children, their faces glowing in the firelight, and felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She thought of the countless nights spent in the desert, wondering if they would survive, and the miracle that had brought them here. Her heart swelled with gratitude, not just for the safety and food Samuel had provided, but for the lessons she had learned, the strength she had found, and the life she could now offer her children. Nava realized that this was the culmination of survival, a life not just preserved, but enriched. She had faced the worst the world could offer, hunger, isolation, and fear, but had emerged stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. Her children had thrived, their spirits restored, their bodies healthy, and their minds curious. The ranch was not just a home, it was a place of growth, learning, and possibility. And for Nava, it was a testament to the power of kindness, trust, and resilience. As the weeks turned into months, Nava and Samuel continued to build a life together, not in romance, but in partnership, mutual respect, and shared responsibility. Nava knew that she could stand on her own, that she had the strength and skill to care for her children and contribute meaningfully to the ranch. Samuel understood that helping her did not make her dependent. It empowered her. Together, they created a space where love, care, and hard work shaped the future. One morning, as the sun rose over the fields, Nava watched her children tending to the animals with confidence. She thought of the days in the desert, the rotten apples, and the endless struggle for survival. And she smiled, knowing that those hardships had brought them to this place, not merely a home, but a sanctuary where life could flourish. She realized that survival was only the beginning. What mattered now was living fully, with hope, joy, and purpose. The ranch, once a place of cautious trust, had become a home in the truest sense. Nava's children laughed, learned, and grew. She worked alongside Samuel, respected and valued, and the desert, though still part of her memory, no longer controlled her life. For the first time in years, she felt complete, a sense of peace and hope that was unshakable. She had survived the harshest conditions imaginable, and now she thrived in a life built on trust, care, and the endless possibilities of each new day. In the quiet of the evening, as the stars appeared over the ranch and the soft sounds of animals settling for the night filled the air, Nava reflected on the journey. The desert had tested her, but it had also revealed her strength. Samuel's kindness had offered her a chance at life, and she had embraced it with courage. Her children, once fragile and fearful, now thrived in a world filled with love, safety, and learning. And in that moment, Nava understood the true meaning of survival. It was not only about staying alive, but about finding hope, creating home, and building a future worth living. The story of their survival had come full circle. From rotten apples in the desert to nourishing meals in a warm home, from fear and uncertainty to laughter and learning, Nava and her children had not only survived, they had begun to truly live. And for Nava, that was the greatest triumph of all. The knowledge that despite the hardships they had found safety, hope, and a place to call home, where love and life could flourish for years to come.